Did y'all see that? Hey y'all, it's Care. Let's talk. So have y'all ever read a book and by the time that you finish it, you realize, wow, I really vibed with this book. It was written just for me. It catered to my very specific taste in what I was looking for. And then when you like move forward in the future and think about it again and think, oh, I want to recommend this book to somebody. And then you get like halfway through and then red flags and alarm bells are going off in your head and you're like, maybe this isn't a good recommendation. Does that ever happen to y'all? So I have two things that inspired me to film this video this morning. One is one of my Goodreads shelves that is kind of under construction. I've started it and not really put that many books into it yet, but it's my weird but good shelf. So this shelf is for books that when I finish it, I did really enjoy the book, but then I just feel either weird recommending it or I just feel like I have to explain myself, like this one was really weird but I liked it. I don't know, it's kind of like I'm insecure about recommending it, but I'm just going for it today because a lot of these books I don't even think I've ever mentioned on my channel. Definitely some of them I've never mentioned. A lot of times I get sucked into just talking about books that everybody seems to be talking about, and yeah, I'm just gonna go down the rabbit hole in some like weird little books that I do like. The first book I'd like to talk about is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Owen Khan Brothwaite, and this leads into the second reason I was inspired to film this video this morning, because Elena from Elena the Great talked about this in one of her videos that she recently uploaded on her channel. I will link her channel and the video down in the description. She's great, go check her out. But yeah, this is kind of the book that started it all. I think this even started the Goodreads shelf. As you can see, it's all in the title, My Sister, the Serial Killer, so anything I'm about to say is completely spoiler free. But basically it is about this woman named Corrade, and she has a sister who she suspects is like killing her boyfriends. Like Ayula is killing Ayula's boyfriends. So Corrade has to make a lot of difficult decisions as a sister, you know, in how to support Ayula, whether or not she's going to help, whether or not like what she's going to do with this information. This is quirky, this is witty, it is so short. I flew through this book in one day. It's less than 200 pages. No, actually it's like 220 pages, but it's still so short. The chapters are only like 3 pages long maximum. It's just one of those books that you eat right up if you're feeling into it. But yeah, this one's number one on the list for sure. Next, I'm gonna talk about one of my very favorite authors that I just don't bring up that much because I feel like he's kind of controversial, but it's Chuck Palahniuk. My favorite book by him is Invisible Monsters, who I guess you could call the main model in this book, becomes disfigured. And she's so used to getting all this attention for her good looks and suddenly doesn't have that anymore and has to kind of cover her face, or she feels like she does. And this book is just the wildest ride I've ever been on. I'll also talk about Fight Club, also by Palahniuk. Even if you're not familiar with the book, I'm sure you've probably at least heard of the movie or the famous line, first rule about Fight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club. And then a very surface level description of this one is it's just a bunch of guys who start a fight club. These are just normal men with 9-to-5 jobs who decide they're gonna start a fight club. These are the craziest things I've ever read. They handle a lot of sensitive topics and I think they have a lot of content warnings, and definitely look into these before you pick them up if you feel like you are sensitive to anything specific. But if you've ever heard the phrase hit the ground running, that is how you start these books. You open the book and hit the ground running. You are in it and there's no escape. I think they're really good. Next, I have 2 books by Dennis Lehane. Dennis Lehane wrote Shutter Island, which is one of my favorite psychological thrillers of all time. I'm not going to talk about that book in this video just because I do recommend it so much, but what I don't talk about is how much I love some of Lehane's other works. Starting with Mystic River, oh my gosh, this is so good. It starts out with these 3 little boys who are childhood friends, and a car comes by and takes one of the boys, and it affects him for the rest of his life. There are very strong trigger and content warnings for this book, so please be cautious in picking it up. But the way that the story weaves together throughout, you know, the kids eventually grow up, so it's about them as children at the very beginning, and then the rest of the book is about these men's lives as adults and how their lives are still affecting each other whether they know it or not. Of course, the man who was taken as a child has suffered his entire life. One of the other boys ended up becoming a police officer, and the third boy ended up growing up into being just a really tough guy, and his daughter is actually murdered, and that's what triggers all of the events in this book to start happening once these men are adults. It actually reminded me a lot of It by Stephen King, and kind of how you know, you have the kids' perspectives and then the adults' perspectives. perspectives. It does not go back and forth like that the entire book, but it did give me that similar feel, and I just rarely hear people talk about this. This has a really cool movie adaptation as well if you're interested in looking at that. And then we have Since We Fell, which I read earlier this year. This is one of his more recent releases, and it's about this woman who is a journalist who suffers like a really public mental breakdown, and because of that she becomes a bit of a shut-in. I think she has a little bit of agoraphobia, and then something happens in her life where she's forced out of her home and she's kind of forced on the run. So it's an interesting dynamic. This is a little bit of an overdone trope for me, but when I tell you that this one is done so well, I mean it. It is a slow burn, so if you don't like boring books, I don't recommend this to you. The beginning is so strong and it hooked me. And then, I mean, this is not a short book by any means. It's almost 400 pages. So, I mean, I would say about 300 pages of this book are a lot of build up, but it makes it so worth it for that last little 10% of the book. It was so good. And this is another one where I just can't begin to tell you what it's about because it just is a crazy journey. Next, another author who has been on my mind a lot recently, Britt Bennett, who wrote The Mothers, which I really enjoyed, but she has a new book that is one of the book of the month picks for this month, called The Vanishing Half, and it sounds so good and I can't wait to get to it soon. It's gonna look so cool with mothers on my shelf. This book follows the lives of 3 very different people. The first character is Nadia, whose mother completes suicide at the beginning of this book. So as you can imagine, her life is just turned completely upside down. The second character is Luke, who is a pastor's son who is this football star, but then because of an injury, it feels like he's later held back in his life, like he can't do everything he wanted to do when he was a teenager. And then the third is Aubrey, who has an abusive past. So there's just so much to unpack here. It's really heavy, but despite how heavy all that seems, this is a pretty short book. I mean, we're talking 274 pages. I read this one in about 2 days, and Bennett's writing style is just so poignant and it's sad and it's just so clear that I felt like this book was real life. I felt like it was not put on, it was not pretentious. It was just like, here are these people's stories, here are how their lives connect, here's how they dealt with loss, here's how they deal with each other. It's very painful, but it's also uplifting and it's really eye-opening. So I think this is so important. I just feel like I don't recommend it enough. It's definitely because of the content. I try to be really careful on this channel with content and trigger warnings, and I just don't ever want to say anything that's going to make somebody upset, but this is a really important book and I'm glad that I'm making this video where I can kind of highlight it here. Next is What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell. I have mentioned this in a video before, but I don't think I've ever recommended it before. I read this when I was first on my quest to try to find something that was similar to A Little Life. I just wanted to fill that depressing pit that's inside of me, and this one kind of worked. It's about a man who goes to Bulgaria. I think that's right, but anyway, he befriends and then starts this really complicated relationship with a young man named Mitko. Mitko is just such a complex character. He struggles with poverty and illness, and he definitely takes advantage of our main character. A lot of the time when I was reading this book, I actually felt really sick. I felt really uneasy. I went into this book wanting that, and then as the author gave it to me, I think that something about this book almost read more like nonfiction. Like, this is a novel. Apparently this is not a true story, but it really reads like one. So be ready for that going into this because it's so realistic. This one's less than 200 pages. It's sitting at 194. If you like bleak, LGBTQ+, really sad, depressing books, then go for it. Just go for it. Next is The Circle by Dave Eggers. I just never talk about this book because I don't read that much sci-fi dystopian. I guess this book falls under those categories. I feel like I don't speak very well on science fiction because I'm such an English major. I just can't. My mind does not wrap very well around things like this. And I don't know if I completely understood this book, but I did really enjoy it. It's about this young woman named May who starts to work for this tech company, and basically what the company does is it just combines your entire, not even your online presence, but just your entire life, and it ties it up into this one. This is why I don't talk about science fiction stuff. I don't know how to explain it. She works with this place called The Circle, and The Circle's goal is for everyone to be 100% transparent. And so, you know how sometimes if you go to the beach and then you want to post your vacation photos and it looks like you're having a great time, but maybe actually when you're at the beach, you weren't having a great time and your family was fighting or something like that. And so how the world perceives you is just from these really fun pictures. I kind of think you see what I'm saying here. This is why I don't recommend it that often, because I don't know how to explain it, but it was really compelling. The only other thing about this is that it did seem really long. We're talking almost 500 pages, and these words are little, so that has held me back in the past, and it was just a really weird storyline for me, but I think it's well executed. I think it's well written, and if my description sounds good, then bless your heart because you stuck with me. But yeah, give it a try. The next book, I don't even know why I've not recommended this yet. I do think it's more mainstream than I give it credit for. It's The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney, and it's a family drama. This book has one of my absolute favorite tropes of all time. It's when a tragedy happens and then a family is brought back together that hasn't seen each other in, I don't even know if they've ever all been together at one time with everyone's extended family and whatnot. So The Nest refers to these siblings' inheritance. One of the siblings is a little more reckless and irresponsible and gets into a lot of trouble and ends up having to dip into everyone else's inheritance. They're not happy about it. They have to come together to try to decide what to do, and the tone of this book is all over the place. I think that's part of the reason why I don't bring it up that much. Like, parts of this book are very funny and relatable, and then other parts are depressing and almost disturbing. Like, there's a lot of this book that really disturbed me. It follows such a wide cast of characters. We're talking maybe like 15 plus people, and like the nitty-gritty details of their lives, and I do really love that. That's a book that is for me, but we're just going back to that point of me saying, yeah, I really liked it, but then I get self-conscious in recommending it to other people. Anytime I hear anyone else talking about this, they don't mention that it's weird, so maybe it's just me, I don't know. If you've read this, please let me know, because I just think this is one of the strangest books I've ever read. The last book I'm going to talk about is one of my all-time favorites. I first read it in middle school. It's called Sassy Tree by Olive Ann Burns. Olive Ann Burns is a Georgia writer. I did a project on her in middle school, and I just felt, I don't know, I've just had this connection with her my entire life. This was written in 1984. I feel like when people talk about this book, they think that this is a classic. I guess you could call it a modern classic, but it follows the story of our main character, Will Tweedy. He is a young teenager, and at the very beginning of the book, his grandmother has passed away. They're in mourning, and then suddenly his newly single grandfather announces that he is eloping with a much younger woman who is new to their southern town, whose name is Miss Love Simpson. That's just one of the best book character names of all time, in my opinion. This does have a lot of social commentary on what it's like to live in the South. I feel like there are a lot of stereotypes, but in my opinion, it's very satirical. So don't take this book too seriously. I do think that it's not meant to be taken seriously in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it really is. This is another one that has major tone shifts. It's hilarious, and then it is the most depressing thing you'll ever read. No, it's not. It's not like the most depressing, but it's sad. There are just a few scenes in this book that I will never forget. I'll just never forget reading them. I think that I have no idea why I've never mentioned this on my channel before. Please read Cold Sassy Tree if it sounds interesting to you. My gosh, I did not mean for this video to be that long. I wanted just to hold the books and go, but I had to just talk. It's my favorite thing to do. If you have any weird recommendations that you want to give to me, I would really love to hear them. Or if you just want to do this video idea, please let me know, because I love hearing people's ideas like this. I always feel so weird and self-indulgent at the end of these videos if I ask you guys to like it and subscribe if you want to see more videos. So I'm just gonna put that out there. You can if you want to. You definitely don't have to. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.